All right, we're here with the man, the myth, the legend, XFL insider, the GOAT, as he doesn't like to be called. But Mike Mitchell, thanks for being on the program.
Thanks for having me on, Mark. It's a pleasure.
All right, so you had this big article coming out over the weekend talking about the NFL Alumni Academy. Why don't you kind of give your take on? It was an extensive article. We did a video about it, and the fans didn't really know what's going on. What was the rumbles going online, and then how were you able to kind of clarify everything? That there was
Yeah,
problems between the two.
right. There's still ongoing talks right now. Both sides, the XFL and the Alumni Academy, are trying to come up with resolutions here. Basically, what it comes down to is that the numbers game isn't checking out for both sides. AA was hoping that more graduates would have opportunities to get into the XFL. Um, And as it stands right now, it appears that they're going to fall short of the number that was expected. Now, AA was hoping that they would have anywhere from 150 to 200 of their graduates in training camp on XFL rosters, which would be 528 players. And the way it stands right now, they're not going to have anywhere close to that number. And so you can argue whether or not, the XFL, quite frankly, I've foreseen this coming because when you looked at the draft pool, you look at the available players, the high demand to get into the league, you knew that it was going to be difficult for them to accommodate. So when I saw personally 4 separate sessions, 50 players per session, I know all the players too and agents that are wisely, they saw that as a shortcut to get into the XFL. So you see guys like Paxton Lynch and others
Yeah.
in NFL Alumni Academy right now thinking, hey, I'm guaranteed an automatic training camp spot, even if for whatever reasons some of the XFL teams don't value me. If I go to the academy and I complete it, then I can go ahead and just have an easier road into the XFL. So there's so many players that want to get into this league. It's disappointing for a lot of the graduates that don't end up in the league. So the XFL has to come up with a resolution where they can, and that's what they're working on, where they can free it up for these graduates to either, which they planned on doing anyway. They wanted these graduates to be at the ready during the XFL season, replacing a team 9 or practice squad. So you have a bunch of players ready to go if teams need to work out guys, because this is pro football. You got injuries every week. So there's definitely going to be players that, unfortunately, it is what it is, get injured, and then you're going to need guys to come in, whether it be the running back position, tight end, etc. So the XFL was hoping to have a pool of those graduates ready to go in Arlington, and now you're going to have some graduates that are, there's just not going to be enough room for all of them to be guaranteed to get into the league, to gain entry. So what they can do is, and what they're working on now is freeing it up for these players to join other leagues, like the USFL, CFL, whatever opportunities may come up. So there's a little bit of added freedom there. The problem too with the academy is that they were promised it's roughly $13,000 per player tuition. These players go into the academy, work out and train there for free. And then if they make an NFL team or an XFL team or whatever league, then a portion of their tuition is covered every week in the weekly player's salary, I believe 30%. So the academy stands if they don't have, let's just say, 100 of their graduates in the XFL who finish out the entire season, they stand to lose a decent amount of money there. So the XFL, easy for me to say, but they could, if they wanted to, try to split the difference there and cover the costs of whatever amount of graduates the academy expected to make. So say, for example, the XFL has 75 academy players that do make active rosters, finish out the whole season, but the academy expected 125, 150. Then, like I said, easy for me to say, but
Right.
the XFL could, let's just say they wanted 150, the XFL could cover the cost of tuition, because the academy, this was a big thing for the academy. They're hoping it, we see the name NFL attached to them, but they're really like the academy in and of itself is a startup, and they're trying to build themselves up. They want to become the premier destination for football talents that are right outside the NFL.
Mm.
So, they've had some academy players end up in the National Football League, but it's been a very small percentage to this point. Well, a partnership with the XFL, you can basically point to. You can tip your hat to it and say, hey, guys came to our academy. Now they're playing the XFL. hopefully a few of those guys, Calvin Turners, all these talented guys, end up in the NFL, and the academy can say, look, we created a bridge for 75 guys to play in the XFL, and now 20 of them are on NFL rosters next year's training camp, and they're trying to make it. And so you can use that as a promotional tool, as a selling point for come to the academy and that's a selling point for agents and players. Look what happened, right?
Mm.
So, there's a little bit of disappointment there. They're trying to work through it. Both sides are trying to work through it, come up with resolutions. What we don't know, and what I don't know specifically, is if there was anything in writing in terms of how many players were guaranteed. We heard the sales pitch.
Mm.
We heard, guaranteed entry spot, all that. But how much of that was actually, contractually? Do they have a number? Is there a contract that says XFL promised 200 players or what have you?
Mm.
So, there are a lot of ways you can look at it. It can end up being a stain on the XFL from a PR standpoint, because you hate making promises that you can't fulfill. It hurts players. Players are always, for lack of a better term, screwed over when it comes to the numbers game.
Mm.
So, it hurts players that, disappointed guys who wanted to get in, have an opportunity to play pro football, and they're not going to get what they thought they were supposed to get. I think also another issue here in this whole process, which I've been digging on every day through messaging and sourcing, is that the XFL and Alumni Academy were supposed to have a partnership in terms of who was selected to be invited into the academy. And I think what we saw, whatever it was, 54 players that were drafted by the XFL in November that came from the academy. But I think what I know and what I've heard is that there were a lot of players that were invited to the academy that weren't necessarily on the XFL's priority list from their teams and football ops. So the good, that might create a little bit of the disconnect here, because the good thing about the XFL, you had Emery Hunt on your show.
Yep.
And the good thing about the XFL is the football ops team is not forcing draft picks on players. They're not forcing assignments. So if you see like a player and you go, wait a minute, AJ McCarron, he's 32 years old. He's a veteran. Why is he in the league? He's in the league because Bruce Gradkowski and Anthony Beck wanted him, reached out to him and recruited him to come play in the league. Now you can question whether or not they should be targeting veteran players like that. But that's their personal choice. So the XFL is not going to step in and say, you guys can't pick him. So that's a cool thing, allowing the teams to make their own personnel decisions, their own wants and likes and all that. So, with the academy here, from what I mentioned, why I'm bringing that all in is because what you see is that perhaps the academy invited some players that weren't on the XFL's list. And so you can't force teams like the Battlehawks. The XFL did not make it mandatory. Take 60 of these academy guys or else. They're letting these teams make those decisions. If they love the academy guys, they'll draft them like they did. And they may very well add more. They're going to add more during the supplemental draft. So, but as it stands right now, the XFL has only 71. That could change depending on NFL teams signing drafted players. But the XFL has only 71 roster spots open. And you got a large pool. They worked out whatever it was, over 1,500 players, eight different showcases. So 71, they drafted over 400. And so there's a lot of guys who are going to be left on the outside looking in. It's only an 8-team league. So you can't, unfortunately, there's a lot of hopefuls out there, but you can't make everyone happy. And then the supplemental draft itself is very fascinating because there's such a high demand to get in the league. There's even NFL practice squad guys that have been in talks with the XFL for a long time. And so that are interested in, perhaps if they don't get a futures contract, because that's what happens at the end of the NFL season. That's why the XFL supplemental draft says that they're for players from leagues with expiring contracts. And so what happens in the NFL is when the NFL season ends, say for the Cleveland Browns, right? Those contracts run out on the practice squad players. And then it's up to the teams whether or not they're going to offer a futures contract. Now, a player can take that and spend the offseason with the NFL and then hope, cross their fingers. Or if they don't get a futures offer, they can decide to go to the XFL to get playing time because they haven't been getting it all year. Or there's some players, like this happened in XFL 2020, that turn down futures deals because they want to play. They want to get game film. They're not getting game film, on their couch, and not playing at all, even though their name, your contract says you're an Atlanta Falcon, but you never play ever. So that's kind of the story there. So it's a fascinating time to figure out all this roster turnover and all the stuff that's going on. Hopefully, ultimately, between the NFL and Alumni Academy, hopefully they can come to a resolution that where everyone wins in the end, because it's beneficial to both sides. For the
Mm.
XFL, for the Alumni Academy. Even if it's just 65 players from the academy that make the XFL, that's still finding professional football jobs for 65 guys who otherwise may not have had that avenue.
Mm. Do you think they could do something like a NFL Alumni Academy draft on the supplemental draft day? Maybe in your article you mentioned maybe expanding the roster size. Because I mean, if I'm going to pay $1 million to make things right with them, I'll just expand my roster to whatever players during training camp, and then those guys will just get cut anyways. Is that a
I know
way
that.
around it?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And it's something I actually, obviously brought up to an extent in my article about this whole situation. If it were me personally, I mean, I'm not doing the budgets with the XFL, right? But if it were me personally, I probably would have had larger training camp rosters. I understand it's only a 10-week regular season. It's a lot different than the NFL. They have 66 players. I probably would have had at least 70. They could decide to expand. I think I mentioned that in my article. Maybe I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how realistic it is, but they could decide to expand the regular season rosters as the year goes along. From, let's say, the USFL did something similar. They started out with very tiny rosters and then ended up expanding. And they had games where they had no backup quarterbacks and all that stuff. So you could expand from 50 to 52 or 50 to 55. Would be ideal. I'm all for. That's why I love these leagues. I'm all for more guys getting jobs and opportunities. I'm all
Mm-hmm.
for that. So it's an option. I don't know if they'll do that. Whether that's in the cards or not. I know they have 45 active on game days, 5 inactive every week. So maybe as the season goes along, you can expand it by a couple of players. It doesn't end up being a whole lot, but even if it's just 16 to 20 extra guys getting an opportunity, why not?
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be injuries during the XFL season. If this isn't the Madden video game where you could turn off injuries and
Yeah.
the 50 players you start with are forever healthy and they play all year.
Mm-hmm.
Just not the way football works. So they're going to need replacements. So I would say to the academy grads that if you don't land a job in the XFL initially, if you don't, end up going to Canada, which is an awesome league with the CFL, if you don't end up signing on with a USFL team, I would say there's a good chance that you could cycle into the XFL and make it into their league during the season, because there are going to be injuries. So that's the whole purpose of why they wanted the academy in Arlington to begin with, through the months of February, March, and April, that they'll have players that are trained and ready to go in great shape. And so we'll see how it all turns out. Hopefully they're able to rectify this and move forward.
Okay, speaking of the academy, what about so a couple things is the transfer pool. We have one of our guys, Gavin, write an article, and Emery Hunt had mentioned too about the XFL looking into maybe who is going to make that jump. Do you think, have you hear anything about maybe some college players being part of the supplemental draft here in the next month?
I haven't, to be honest, I haven't heard anything specifically about that. You would figure that that would be an option. I know that's something the USFL talked up a lot in 2022, but there weren't very many, if any, players that made that leap and that decision. We saw the success of Kenny Robinson, went from being a transfer portal player, ended up playing in the XFL, coached by Tim Lewis on that Battlehawk staff. Tim Lewis is now in Arlington. And they did such a great job that the XFL actually had one of their players drafted by an NFL team. Robinson is still on the Carolina Panthers 3 NFL seasons later. So that's a success story in and of itself, just making an NFL team and then being there for 3 years, being drafted. So that was a cool story there. You would think, and I heard Emery, it was a great interview you had with him. And Gavin's a very good writer. So that's a great topic to cover. You would think that a lot more transfer portal players would entertain that option. It's just ridiculous right now with the transfer portal. It's gotten to the point where hundreds upon hundreds of players are going into it, and they're hoping for another opportunity, another window for them, trying to capitalize on NIL and all that, trying to benefit financially from that, get a little extra coin while they're in college and play at a place that maybe appreciates them more, whatever the case is there. But I haven't heard any specifics. We're focusing in on the supplemental draft, but I wouldn't count out additions to rosters after the supplemental draft. There might
Oh,
be, yeah, because the way it works out now, the USFL, it's a little more clear there because guys' contracts expire on 12/31. So if there are XFL teams right now, say for example the Arlington Renegades that have an interest in a Jordan McCrary to play center, his contract expires on 12/31. He can just join his former coach Jonathan Himbaugh in Arlington. So he coached him in Birmingham. So, but when it comes to like NFL practice squad players, some NFL teams, their season ends and they don't make the playoffs, and therein lies the decisions they have to make in terms of future contracts, all that to all their practice squad players, because all those contracts expire. But some NFL teams make the playoffs. And so the NFL season doesn't
oh,
end until the 8th. So, and teams retain their practice squads while they're still playing in the postseason. So we might see a supplemental draft, and then we could very well see additions made after, let's just say, I'll just throw out a team's name. Let's say the Commanders make the playoffs, and they don't unfortunately go all the way. If they have players on their practice squad, say January 12th that the XFL is interested in, then or January 15th or what have you, then
mhm.
the XFL could sign a few of those guys to come on board. So I don't know if there's going to be any late arrivals from the transfer portal itself. I think Emery did a very good job of breaking that down and why that should be a viable option for guys. I know you can make money now playing college football, so I get it. And
Yep.
that college experience comes and goes quickly, and you won't get it back. So it's a great thing. But I would think a lot of those guys would um, look into the XFL and USFL option. It's something I would do if I was in the transfer portal. It's got to be a two-way street too. So I'm sure that the XFL's football ops team and their team football operations teams have scouted a lot of these players in college. I know they have. And so there could be some guys in the transfer portal that they would love to add to their teams. But it's an interesting decision because some players like quarterbacks or what have you, they want to be assured that they're starting, that they're going to be starters, and the pro teams can't guarantee that. So it's like you might come in as quarterback number 4, might not make the roster. So that's where the transfer portal guys have to consider if they're going to make that pro jump. Am I not going to get playing time? I'm going into transfer portal so I could get more playing time. And then what if I go to the XFL and I don't get my playing time? So that's always possible too. But so we'll see how that all goes. But I would think that's more of as the USFL and the XFL prove their viability, I think as we go move forward, years 2, 3, 4, and beyond, more players are going to consider going pro and playing in leagues like the XFL. I just don't know how many of them we get in year 1 in XFL 2023.
That makes sense. Now, first, speaking of quarterbacks, we've got 2 new quarterbacks, according to America's team, DC Defenders, D'Eriq King, somebody that you had reported about too, and the other quarterback was for Houston, picked up a guy. So what are your take on?
Yeah, Kurt Bankert. Both guys have been in discussions with the XFL for a long time now. And so I'm not surprised to see either one. I was told before the XFL draft that there was a 4th quarterback that Houston was looking to add, that they were going to add 3 during the draft and assignment process, but they had a 4th that was on an NFL roster. Turns out that 4th was Kurt Bankert. So he joins the Houston Roughnecks. That's a crowded and talented quarterback room. D'Eriq King, no surprise there with the Defenders. As I reported back in September, I listed all the assigned quarterbacks that are on the league now with the teams that I reported they would be. King is a great addition to the league. He's going to be exciting. He's unique. He's only 5'9", 196 pounds. It's one of the reasons why he's not considered a traditional pro style quarterback. But he was a dynamic player at Houston and then at Miami, University of Miami, the U. And so problem with him was his size and injuries, durability, but an exciting player, extremely productive. The Defenders are going to have a fun offense. Like if you're a football fan, that duo of Eric Dungy and D'Eriq King, I could see both of them playing every week because they're both dynamic runners. It's almost like a Taysom Hill / Kyler Murray combination, those two. And, King is from Texas, like Murray, actually broke Murray's records in the state of Texas at Manville.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he's a dynamic talent. King is a dynamic talent. So the Defenders, Fred Keiss is their offensive coordinator. Obviously, their head coach is Reggie Barlow. they have a lot of flexibility and versatility with those two guys. Um, King started out as a wide receiver in college. He actually had over 60 receptions in college. Dungy has worked out in the NFL and was with the Giants practicing and playing as a tight end. So I can see the defenders line up an entire series with King and Dungy on the field at the same time.
That'd
And
be cool.
I know the XFL still has the rules with the double forward pass, so you could really utilize it with those two guys um, on the field at the same time. And definitely in the red zone, they're going to have a lethal combination with those two. And then you got the running backs that they drafted as well, Abram Smith, who's still getting NFL workouts. He was the fifth leading rusher in the nation last season at Baylor. That was a heck of a draft pick by the defenders. So I think they're going to have a fun offense. If you like running quarterbacks that can create plays with their legs, King and Dungy, what a tandem. That's going to be a fun group. Those two, there's no way you can't be an offensive coordinator and not want to get both those guys on the field. You have to figure out a way. So the defenders will end up adding another quarterback. And I think that's going to be fascinating too, because you want to see if they add a similar style quarterback, somebody who's mobile, or if they go the more traditional route with a pocket passer. Because it's highly unlikely that they go into training camp with only two signal callers at the position.
Yeah. So one of the articles that we had Pat Ruffino put out there about BC Lions quarterback Nathan Rourke making the way to NFL camps. And we put it out there and got a lot of reaction, shocker, that, is there a possibility somebody like him could wind up in the XFL? Because the point is that, kind of what Emery Hunt and you've talked about with this, players sitting on the practice squad, not really getting an opportunity to play, and just, now granted they make a ton of money even just being on a practice squad, getting the chance, maybe, hey, and then these NFL teams pull the trigger on a 2-year contract like PJ Walker got, plays in the XFL for a season. People look at him like, okay, he can play in the American style game. I've definitely, he lights it up. We want him. We're going to give him a 2 or 3 year contract with guaranteed money. You think that's a possibility, or is that even out there at all? The XFL interest in him or any other CFL quarterback?
Sure. As far as Rourke goes, he has opportunities right now with the NFL. He obviously just worked out for the Colts. He's worked out for several NFL teams, Raiders among them. So,
and this is all preface that he does not get an NFL contract.
Right.
He gets an NFL contract, forget it. I wouldn't do it either.
I think he's gonna land on an NFL team. I think he's gonna end up, it's entry level for these guys. So you have to you want to try to pick him and his agent, have to pick a team where they feel like they have a decent path to becoming a regular backup on the team. Whether that be second or third string, you'd prefer second. So they need to look at coaching staffs. That's a decision they need to make there. But obviously, if you get in the NFL, even if it's at the entry level position, you're a 6-figure player, right? And Rourke is interesting because he's a Canadian quarterback for sure, but he's an American quarterback, because he played at Ohio, was a superstar there. But he played in an RPO styled offense. So when he was coming out for the draft, he was seen as a guy who needed to evolve as a passer. And I think he did a very good job in Canada with BC. Working with Michael Riley was a benefit to him. So I think he's looking at the NFL and the CFL. He doesn't have that high of a salary right now. So if you were to come in and try to go after him, if you offered him a decent enough salary, you'd figure maybe you can lure him a little bit, but even if he comes back to the CFL, he's going to get a raise. You can't pay him $65,000 a season. True. It's just, he's a superstar. So that's going to happen for him. As far as we'll see a Rourke of the XFL, I don't see it. I don't see
it out there.
Yeah, it would be fun. It's a possibility. It's something to ponder. For sure. And I understand why Pat would, write about it. It's something to consider, right? It's a different angle, but I don't see it. But, anything's possible. As far as other CFL quarterbacks, it's going to be interesting to see in the next few weeks with CFL free agency starting in February, which isn't ideally lining up with joining the XFL. Be interesting to see what happens with a guy like a Vernon Adams. The Lions have a decision to make. They're obviously hopeful that they get Nathan Rourke back. They might add another quarterback in case Rourke signs with, say, the Colts or somebody. And so how highly do they value Vernon Adams? They traded for him. They gave up draft capital for him during the season. He's their insurance policy for Nathan Rourke. So I bring up Adams because I know that June Jones was extremely high on him when he was coming out for the draft. And he's from the Pacific Northwest. And Jones is coaching in Seattle. So There might be some, and I know of a few CFL players that they're more. I don't want to use this term saying they're on the lower rung of rosters, but there are some CFL players that are trying to get out of their contract so they could come join the XFL. Because right now the way it works is their free agency doesn't start until February. So you kind of need permission, kind of sort of. And there
Mhm.
might be some players on the lower end of CFL rosters that have already played in the XFL. I'm aware of a defensive back actually played on Montreal that's looking to find his way back in. So that there's that possibility, although the timeline doesn't quite work out of some CFL guys joining the league, but everybody's more interested in the quarterbacks, right? So, but we could see that again, like the transfer portal. I think the CFL pipeline, guys leaving the CFL to join the XFL, that's something more for the future. I'm not saying that there won't be a few guys here and there sprinkled in. We've
Mhm.
already had like the defenders. They took a defensive back that was on the Calgary Stampeders that got out of his contract there, in Motley, who's a DC boy, DC native. So the quarterback stuff is a lot more sexy. Nathan Rourke would be fun. Vernon
Mhm.
Adams would be fun. I'm not ruling it out. You can't rule out anything, but I would be surprised on the Rourke front. Adams, who knows? We'll see.
Yeah. So let's jump to the other pending issue out there is the Vegas Vipers. I would say if there's two um, knocks on this regime, I mean, when we went with the 2.0 era, I mean, things were pretty smooth. I don't really remember anything kind of hiccups or anything. In this 3.0 era, grand things are different now. We've got the Vegas Viper situation, working with the really actually you could throw in the CFL and that whole talks,
Right.
but you've mentioned that before that they were kind of not ready yet and kind of waiting the whole COVID stuff out. So what are you hearing anything about the Vegas Vipers? What's going on with their situation? Is it Cashman Field or
See that every day. This is daily. Like even before we started this interview, I was in my DMs, like looking at a bunch of different messages because it's constant digging on this situation. Because right now, there are a lot of people that are working extremely hard in the XFL that are understaffed that are hoping that the Vegas situation gets cleared up because it's holding things up. And so it's holding up other teams because you want to release team schedules. You want to be able to sell tickets. You want to know itineraries, travel, all that.
that's true.
And so there are a lot of people right now working in XFL on other XFL teams that are like, come on, get this done already, you know? So
Mm,
I get it. They're getting antsy, you know? And so as far as specific stadiums, good Lord, I know that the desire from the get-go was Allegiant. There have been hiccups in there. I'm not saying that's been ruled out, but I'm not so sure that the Davis family, Mark Davis, is too favorable. It's unfortunate with the XFL coming into that building to begin with. That's created a problem. And then from there, I've heard that even though Cashman may very well be available, it's the league itself is not too keen on that general area downtown or the facilities there. I've heard that they've entertained high school football stadiums. The most notable one is Bishop Gorman. Again, it's a nice stadium. It's a for high schools, it's high end, but as far as facilities and everything else, it's not quite up to snuff for a pro football team. And then you have the
mm.
Las Vegas ballpark, which is a desirable stadium. And when you look at them, they have a minor league team there, the Las Vegas Aviators. It's a 10,000 seat stadium. They do very good attendance, especially for minor league standards, minor league baseball standards. They average close to 7,000 fans per game. The XFL would destroy that. If the Vipers played in that stadium, they'd sell it out every week. So I don't understand the hang up there, why the ballpark would not be interested in having just, 5 dates, maybe 6 or 7, depending on the playoffs. So I don't understand why they wouldn't want to guarantee because 10,000 they would max that out very quickly. So no disrespect to the Las Vegas Aviators who are a nice ticket there, but the XFL would top that. So I have no doubt about that whatsoever. And that's the hangup right now. It's like, which one of these stadiums will they be able to? I know that Allegiant, a lot of people have told me that it's dead, but I do have messaging where people tell me they're still hopeful about that. I don't know
Oh,
if they're going to be able to work that out. Ballpark is a desired spot, but I'm not so sure for whatever crazy reason that they're receptive to having the XFL there. Whether that's political or not, I maybe they don't want good business. I don't know. So
yeah.
I'm trying to figure that one out because that's a little baffling to me. You would think that they want to have uh, you know uh, they're sold out building all the time with ABC and ESPN. No disrespect to the Aviators, but there are no ABC or ESPN or FX games. There's no Dwayne Johnson. You don't have the Rod Woodsons and all that. You don't have that cachet, celebrity cachet, a sports celebrity cachet attached to the Aviators. If you put a gun at people's heads, they wouldn't be able to name two Aviator players, let alone one.
Yeah.
So maybe they're protective of their minor league baseball team that has 6,000 fans per game, which is nice for minor league standards, but I don't understand why they wouldn't. So I think there's some frustration in the league office. The way I see it, and I think I may have said this on your show previously, Jerry Cardinal chose Las Vegas as one of the desired markets. And from a business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. And you can understand why Redbird and, their partnership, which has dealings with billions of dollars with a bunch of prominent leagues, NFL, NBA, MLB, everybody. So worldwide with soccer. So you could see why they would have an interest in Vegas from a financial standpoint. But these hiccups are not great. So ultimately, at the end of the day, sooner or later, I mean, we heard Danny Garcia last week saying it's going to be weeks before they release their schedule.
Weeks.
Which makes you wonder if this is something that's going to be put off until the first week of January. And the nuclear option, the last resort option, is to have the Vipers play in Texas at one of the three stadiums the XFL is going to be using, either Arlington or San Antonio. They have to work that out. They have to figure out the schedule there. It's a shame if it were to come to that. The XFL is hopeful that it doesn't come to that, but there's some hurdles right now and some politics involved. Boyd Stadium is just not doable. There's a lot of hurdles with that. And then Cashman, even playing in Cashman, which, you might have to settle for something like that. But, Cashman's difficult too because it's a baseball stadium and it's not quite up to snuff. It's a very old facility. So you wish you had more time to work on it and upgrade it. So you would think ballpark would be great for the XFL. But for whatever reason, I've been getting mixed messaging in terms of their interest in having the league and their rationale for not having the league not really working for me. I don't really get it. I have to kind of I got to tread carefully here, but I think there's some kind of like hidden agenda there that I'm not quite catching because from a business standpoint, it doesn't make sense for them to not be keen on it. So they should be. Why wouldn't you want to fill up your stadium?
Yeah.
Bring eyeballs, like real eyeballs, not minor league eyeballs, and nobody knows who the Aviators are. You want like real eyeballs from ABC, ESPN at your park in your city.
That help you sell tickets too for your games.
Help you sell tickets
for your baseball games.
Make money.
Which are boring.
Yeah, I don't want to crap on baseball, but you would think you would want to bring. It also brings publicity for your baseball team. Like, look at this beautiful stadium. We have the Aviators here. Here's where we play. They'll get traffic from that. People will go, really? The Aviators play there? Wow, that's cool. So, and then people will know more about you. But anyway, for some reason, there's some resistance here. So, they can't quite figure out why. And it's constant. Hopefully, when I get off with you today after this interview, maybe I'll get some messaging that points me towards the direction. I keep hearing they're near, they're close, they picked the venue, but we, until we see the proof. So we're sitting here as we record this, it's December 12th. If we're here on January 12th and we haven't heard anything, that's just awful.
Yeah,
that's
it is
awful. I mean, there's no way I can't dance around that and paint that in a pleasant light. So we can't hit training camp without knowing where Vegas is going to play. I mean,
yeah, that's the fear there. But I'll tell you what, Aviators, like, I'm not going to hate on you. I like all sports that give people opportunity. We will promote the heck out of the Aviators baseball season throughout all of our XFL channels. If you just put the team in there, we'll get it done, and that will be it. So we're trying to do our part. We'll buy some merch.
Right, exactly. You had an XFL league even in 2020, new league. People don't know the players, don't know the names in the winter playing in bad weather that averaged nearly 20,000 fans per game. Now, that doesn't sound like much to NFL fans. I'm a huge NFL fan myself, but for a new league, 20,000. How many minor league teams? Like I said, the Aviators are second in minor league attendance. I believe I forgot which affiliate is first, but they average a little under 7,000 per game. So with the XFL, you're going to average close to, in that stadium, they don't need to average 20,000. But in the XFL, you're going to, in San Antonio, you're going to have 20 to 30,000 or more. St. Louis, you're going to have 20 to 30,000 or more. Seattle's going to be in that a ballpark as well. So I just don't get it from a business standpoint why you wouldn't want to have, it's not even a field issue either, because it's really 5 games. So it's like you're not going to just destroy the field, So
Right.
so anyhow, but yeah, so hopefully this all unravels and gets settled. People in the league keep telling me, get ready, Mike, next week. So I've
All
heard
right.
that. I've heard that for a bit. So
Yeah.
hopefully, like I said, we finally get whether it's Cashman. Look, wherever they end up playing, team's going to look great. Those are great uniforms.
Yes.
They've got some very good players, and so it's going to be fun to watch regardless. But in a perfect world, this would have been settled already.
Yeah. All right. So final question. Any other things that you've been hearing about, rumblings, potential players? I mean, there's a lot out there behind the scenes I'm hearing. Well, watch out for this supplemental draft. There's going to be some big names dropped there. Are you hearing any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that the supplemental part, the player additions might be more than multiple. That you might have a supplemental draft that'll include, we're expecting eventually Brian Scott and all that, maybe Jordan Tiamu. So last time I was on your show, I kind of let it out of the bag that Kyle Sloter was going to Arlington and Luis Perez was going to Vegas, and then it turned out to be the case.
Yeah.
I think we could get some surprising USFL names in there, but from what I've heard, to not be, I know this is crazy, right? Because we just went through a draft, to not be too hung up on just the supplemental draft, that there could be additions after the supplemental draft, because like I mentioned, the whole NFL practice squad thing, futures contracts, etc. There might be some players that become available mid-January. Now, it's a little bit awkward for guys to join a team at that point, but we could see some late assignments, late additions by teams. So hopefully there aren't too many injuries in training camp, but that's always a possibility as well. So I've been hearing that. I don't expect like some bombshell to come out of left field, like, oh, my Colin Kaepernick has agreed to join the league or something like that. So I don't expect any of that. But I do think, and I do know, that the XFL has been in contact with guys who are currently on practice squads, and that some of those players, they've also had contact with players like the Carson Strongs and the Akil Glasses. And for whatever reason, it's agents' prerogative, players' prerogative. There are some players, that just, they want to still hold out for that NFL dream, and they're not sure. And they don't even feel like they're not sure, because what we're seeing right now, I believe the XFL has 24 quarterbacks on their rosters. I think with the latest 2 additions of Kurt Bankert and De'Ara King, you've got 24 at the moment. What we're seeing is like some of these rooms are crowded, and not some of these quarterbacks are not guaranteed. Like Houston's got 4 quarterbacks now. So does Brandon Silvers make the team? So I mean that's a thing. So you might have a couple of guys who are on these lists. San Antonio, I believe, has 4 quarterbacks as well. A couple of their quarterbacks have been getting NFL tryouts. Reed Sinnett, who was just recently on the Dolphins about a month and change. So I think there's still some fluidity. And that's why when I wrote the article in September, when I listed all the assigned quarterbacks that are now in the league, I put in the title of the article tentatively. Because we didn't know for sure if like King ended up on an NFL team, and he left obviously, and he's back with the XFL, but you don't know for sure if these players end up in the XFL. So because of the NFL and everything else. So I think you might get past the supplemental draft and go, oh, they're done with their rosters, and they're not. So that's where it's going to be fascinating about January. Like there may still very well be additions in the middle of January while camp is going on. And then so that's something that I know, digging deep into these behind the scenes, that is in play. Because there's going to be some practice squad guys that are on playoff teams in the NFL that don't get eliminated until mid-January, what have you. So it's fascinating times. It should be fun.
So one last question I was just thinking of, are we going to see guys that played in the XFL to jump to, let's say maybe they played a full season, or maybe, they were kind of the 4th string quarterback on the Houston team. Do you think you see these guys jump ship to and then go and play in the USFL after that? I mean, could we see maybe 20% of the XFL roster, maybe guys that didn't get a lot of playing time and a lot of tape? Because I understood the contracts for the XFL, they were basically like 1-year deals, and you can do whatever you want after it's over. That they're not signing to, at least this was the kind of chatter before, was that they're not signing 2-year contracts or exclusive contracts. They're like, yeah, once you're done with the XFL, you can go do whatever you want.
Yeah, I'm still digging into that to try to figure out all the particulars involved there, but I'm pretty sure, it's interesting because the XFL season ends in April, right where late April, right where the USFL season is starting. The USFL's got to do their due diligence. They've got a relationship with Hub Football, so that could produce some players directly into their league. They're, of course, going to be looking at the guys the XFL didn't draft.
Hmm.
Whoever guys that couldn't make the league that the XFL didn't have any room for, they'll look for that. You'll look at XFL training camp cuts. You got to remember there, you're going from 528 to 400 players when the regular season starts. So that's 128 players there. And then, you could look at guys in the league who maybe things didn't work out for them in the XFL that could end up in the USFL. No matter how that works out, some people will label it as they're getting the leftovers or what have you. No matter how it works out, it's great for the players because you have additional options. So sure, could there be some XFL guys who get cut in camp or maybe end up, in the USFL too, it comes down to pay because some of the reasons that players are so interested, why so many USFL players are interested in coming and playing in the XFL is, okay, it's a bump in pay. It's full coverage of medical and lodging, which is not exactly the case in the USFL. But it's also the timeline of the season.
Hmm.
That's a big factor for a lot of
Yeah.
players that are looking to latch on. We saw it in the USFL. A bunch of players signed on with NFL teams. A lot of the guys got cut almost immediately. The ones, we ended up with one player making the active roster at the end of the run. There are several players in the USFL that are on practice squads right now. But, Kyle Sloter and Luis Perez, who played great in the USFL, now in the XFL, but they ended up on NFL teams and they had basically a cup of coffee. Kyle Sloter was cut after one preseason game. Same thing with Luis Perez. They didn't have enough time to learn playbooks and all that. So to gel with their coaches and teammates. So I think the timeline's a big factor there as far as the pay, the coverage, playing in home and away games. I think right now with the USFL, one of the interesting factors involved here is that, for quite some time now, and I've reported this, they're planning on having a northern hub in Michigan. With the USFL, with the Generals, Stars, Panthers, Maulers. Now, that's great. That'd be awesome. But the problem, too, with that is that a lot of the USFL players are not too happy about that potential setup because the cost of living between Birmingham and Michigan is very different. So they want to know if they're getting paid more by the USFL this coming season or if lodging is going to be 100% covered by the league or not. So there are a lot of guys that are
Interesting.
there are a lot of guys that are waiting for the USFL to get back to them and give them, be a little bit more definitive on what they're going to be doing there. Because I know of several Generals players that are unhappy about potentially playing in Michigan because of the cost of living and because they're trying. So the big thing with the USFL, if they're going to lure in the future XFL players away, they're going to need to bump their pay a little bit. And they're going to need to provide, better coverage with lodging. Not we'll cover this much or that much. A lot of the USFL players are very creative, very college-like atmosphere. Guys, like 4 or 5 guys living together at the same time to cut costs and doing all that. Some guys are married and have kids. Like if you're a 22, 23-year-old guy, you could probably get away with that, living that college lifestyle. But some guys have kids and all that. So how are you going to, move in your whole offensive line to live with you. So I mean, maybe unless they could chip out and take care of the kids. So, but yeah. So I think the USFL can lure players because there's only so many room for guys, and so you can get some of the guys. I think it's going to be more transparency would help with them, and the timeline of their season is different. So it's a little bit of a deterrent as far as that goes. But and they're making some good steps and good strides, but right now they're not a fully fledged league. The XFL is trying to be a fully fledged league immediately, home and away games, all that. So it's sure the USFL, depending on how they treat their players, pay and transparency and everything else, they could be a destination for maybe guys who are upset about their XFL experience. Who knows?
Yeah, because I mean, then you got indoor football league, and you got that partnership, and you got the fan control football. So lots of spots for players. Mike Mitchell, as always, appreciate it. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on social media?
Okay, I write for so many different sites. Obviously, XFLNewsHub.com, CFLNewsHub.com.
And congrats on the Argos with the Grey Cup champion, Mike
Tremendous.
Mitchell, the Argos reporter on CFL News Hub. Congrats.
Yeah, well, it's great. And welcome Marcus Nielsen to the team, who's doing great work with CFLNewsHub.com. Pleasure covering the Argos the last 2 seasons for the website. They are a historic team, the oldest professional football team in history. The Argos are the winningest team in CFL history. So they're back on the mountaintop. That was a tremendous season. The
It was a
Grey
great
Cup was,
game.
oh my goodness, the Grey Cup was fantastic. They denied a dynasty against, tip of the hat to the Blue Bombers there with Mike O'Shea. So the CFL is a great league. The Argos have great history, great team. It was great to see them. They deserve all the flowers they've been getting, and it's a pleasure covering that team. The players, coaches, everybody involved there are so forthcoming, the PR team. So tip of the hat to them. And so I write about the CFL, CFLNewsHub.com, XFLNewsHub.com, USFLNewsHub.com, covering the Generals in the
Wow,
league. And
shocker
then
names.
and then of course the JetPress.com, covering my favorite team, pro team of all time, the New York Jets. And you can reach me at Twitter at by Mike Mitchell. That's BYMIKEMITCHELL.
All right, Mike. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.